Thiaoouba prophecy. After politicians, you have the problem of journalists and reporters. There are some among them, although unfortunately rare, who try to do their job of disseminating information honestly and sincerely, attending carefully to their sources, but we are greatly alarmed that most of them seek only sensationalism. Your television stations too screen more and more scenes of violence. If those responsible were obliged to study psychology before being able to undertake such grave responsibilities, a step in the right direction would have been taken. Your reporters seem to seek and even prey on scenes of violence, murder, tragedy, and disaster. We are sickened by their behavior. The leaders of a country, the journalists, in fact anyone who, by their position, is able to exert influence on the people, has an enormous responsibility towards millions of people who are no more nor less than his fellow creatures. Too often, even those who have been elected to their positions by the people, forget the obligations they have in this regard until, that is, a few months prior to a new election, when it occurs to them that the people are dissatisfied and might vote them out. This is not the case with journalists though, as they have not needed to inspire confidence in the people in order to attain their positions, and yet they have a similar power to influence in ways which are good or bad. Indeed, they are capable of doing much good when they alert public attention to danger and injustice, and this should be their main function. To return to the need for such high-profile people to understand and apply psychology, I will give you a good example to illustrate what I mean. On TV we see the following report: a young man has just taken a rifle and killed 7 people, including 2 women and 2 young children. The reporter shows the bloodstains and the bodies, adding that the killer had imitated the style of an actor, well known for his violent roles in films. And the result? The murderer is going to be proud of himself. Not only has he achieved national notoriety, he has also been compared with one of the most popular heroes of violent modern films. But, beyond that, another such madman who sees the reports and hears the commentaries of reporters who pay unwarranted attention to this odious crime, will be inspired to seek his own moment of national glory. Such a person is usually a failure, someone repressed, frustrated, inhibited, someone ignored, who yearns for recognition. He has just seen the report and he knows that all violence is reported, and sometimes exaggerated, by TV reporters and journalists. Perhaps his picture will appear on the front page of all the newspapers, and why not? Then he will go before the courts and perhaps be referred to by a name like Jack the Ripper or the Strangler with the Velvet Glove. No longer will he rank among ordinary mortals. The harm that such irresponsible reporting can do is unimaginable. Thoughtlessness and irresponsibility are not qualities apparent in civilized nations. That's why I say, on Earth, you have not even achieved the first letter of the word civilization. So, what is the solution? Why do you ask such a question, Michel? You have been chosen because we know how you think, and I know that you know the answer to your question. Still, if you insist, you will hear it from my mouth. Journalists, reporters, and anyone else whose function it is to disseminate information should devote no more than 2 to 3 lines to such cases of murder. They could simply say, "We have just learned of the murder of 7 people by an irresponsible lunatic. This murder occurred at whatever location and is a sorry event in a country that considers itself to be civilized." Full stop. Those who seek their day or weeks of glory would surely sidestep murder as a means of attaining it, if their efforts received so little publication in return. Don't you agree? What, then, should their reports comprise? There are so many worthwhile things to show, reports of worthwhile events, which improve the psyche of Earth people rather than brainwashing them in a negative way. Reports such as the risking of life to rescue a child who was drowning, for example, or of assistance given to the poor to improve their lot. Of course, I agree with you entirely, but I'm sure the circulation of newspapers depends on the sensational news they contain. And there we are, back at the root of all evil that I mentioned earlier, money. This is the curse that undermines your entire civilization, and yet, in this particular case, the situation could be reversed if those responsible were motivated to change. On no matter which planet, the greatest dangers to humankind are, ultimately, of a psychological, rather than material nature. Drugs, similarly, affect the psyche of the individual. Not only do they ruin physical health, they also reverse the individual's process of universal evolution. At the same time as they induce states of euphoria or artificial paradise, they are also directly attacking the astral body. I will elaborate on this, for it is of great importance. The astral body can only be harmed by two things: drugs and the vibrations occasioned by certain kinds of noise. Considering only drugs, it must be understood that they have an influence that is totally against nature. They remove the astral body to another sphere where it should not be. The astral body should be either in a physical body or with its higher self, of which it is a part. When drugged, an individual's astral body is as though asleep, experiencing artificial sensations that completely distort his or her judgment. It is in the same situation as a physical body is during an important surgical operation. If you like, it's like a tool that we bend or break by using it incorrectly or for a task for which it was not intended. According to the length of time that a person is under the influence of drugs, his or her astral body is going to decline, or, more exactly, it is going to become saturated with false data. Recovery for the astral body can take several lifetimes. For this reason, Michel, drugs should be avoided at all costs. There is something I don't understand then, I interrupted. Twice, now, you have given me drugs to take in order to release my astral body from my physical body. Haven't you, thereby, done me a disservice? No, not at all. We used a drug that is not an hallucinogen, in order to assist a process which could occur quite naturally with adequate training. It is not a drug that blinds, and therefore presents no danger to your astral body, and its effects are very short-term. Returning to the problems of your planet, Michel, the solution depends on love, not money. It requires that people rise above hate, resentment, jealousy, and envy, and that each person, whether he be street sweeper or community leader, put his neighbor before himself, offering his hand to whoever needs it. Everyone has need, both physically and mentally, of his neighbor's friendship, not only on your planet, but on all planets. As Jesus said, when we sent him to you almost 2,000 years ago, love each other, but of course. Tao. I interrupted again, almost rudely this time. What did you just say in regard to Jesus? Jesus, Michel was sent to Earth from Thiaoouba, almost 2,000 years ago, just as Lashanusi also went to Earth and has returned. Of all that had been explained to me, it was this unexpected revelation which shocked me most. At the same time, Tao's aura rapidly changed color. The soft gold mist around her head became almost yellow, and the gentle shower of colors from the top of her head blazed forth with new energy. A great aura is calling us, Michel. We must go immediately. Tao stood up. I adjusted my mask and followed her outside, most intrigued by the sudden interruption and uncustomary haste. We boarded the flying platform and rose, vertically, above the branches of the trees. Soon we were flying over the beach, and then the ocean, traveling at a speed much greater than ever before. The sun was quite low in the sky, and we skimmed over waters that were emerald green or a perfect azure blue, if I can describe colors in earthly terms. Huge birds, with a wingspan of about 4 meters, crossed our path just in front of us, and the sun's rays lit up the bright pink feathers of their wings and the bright green feathers of their tails. Before long we had reached the island, and Tao brought the platform down again in the park, in which seemed to be precisely the same spot as before. She signaled that I should follow her, and we set off, she walking and I running behind her. This time we did not head for the central doko, but took a different path, which led us eventually to another doko, of the same huge size as the central doko. 2 people, both taller than Tao, were waiting for us under the entrance light. Tao spoke to them in a low voice, then moved nearer to them and engaged in a brief consultation, from which I was excluded. They stood still, casting curious glances my way, but not smiling at all. I could see their auras, which were less brilliant than Tao's, a sure indication that they were not as highly evolved in spirit. For a considerable time, we waited without moving. The birds from the park approached, watching us. No one, apart from me, paid them any attention. My companions were apparently deep in thought. I remember clearly, a bird, resembling a bird of paradise, came and stationed itself between Tao and me, for all the world as though it wanted to be admired. The sun would soon set, and I remember watching its last rays high up in the trees, igniting sparks of purple and gold among the branches. A flock of birds fluttered noisily in the canopy, breaking the silence that had been established. As if this had been a signal, Tao asked me to take off my mask, close my eyes and to take her hand that she might guide my steps. Much intrigued, I did as she asked. Moving forward, I felt the light resistance, now familiar to me, as we entered the doko. I was told telepathically to keep my eyes half closed and lowered, and to follow in Tao's wake. We advanced about 30 paces, before Tao stopped and placed me at her side. Still by telepathy, she indicated that I could now open my eyes and look around. This I did quite slowly. Before me were 3 figures remarkably like those I had met previously. Like the others, they sat cross-legged, straight-backed, on fabric-covered blocks, each seat being of a color that complemented the occupant. Tao and I were standing beside 2 similar seats until, telepathically, and without a gesture, we were invited to sit down. I looked around discreetly, but saw no trace of the 2 characters who had met us at the entrance. Perhaps they were behind me. Like before, the eyes of the Daori gave the impression of being illuminated from within, but, by contrast, this time I was immediately able to see their auras, resplendent with bright colors, all so pleasing to the eye. The central figure rose by levitation, without altering his position, and slowly floated towards me. He stopped before and slightly above me, placing one of his hands at the base of my cerebellum and the other on the left side of my skull. Again, I felt my body invaded by the fluid-like feeling of well-being, but this time I almost fainted. Removing his hands, he returned to his seat. Perhaps I should explain that the details concerning the position of his hands on my head were provided later, by Tao, as, once again, it was beyond me at the time to register such details. And yet I remember a thought that occurred to me, a thought rather out of place at such a time. When he resumed his seat, I'll probably never get to see one of these figures use his 2 legs as everyone else does.